At dawn on June 22, 1941, while the morning mist still lay over the vast plains of Eastern Europe, one of the greatest gambles in history began. A gamble by a man who believed himself to be invincible. Without a formal declaration of war, more than 3 million German soldiers, along with thousands of tanks and aircraft, surged toward the borders of the Soviet Union. The operation, known as Barbarossa, was not merely a military attack, but a symbol of the peak of arrogance, ambition, and the illusion of power. Yet what at first appeared to be a lightning advance and an inevitable victory ultimately turned into one of the greatest defeats in human history. A defeat that changed the course of World War II and the fate of the world. Adolf Hitler, the leader of Nazi Germany, after his stunning successes in Poland, France, and much of Europe, had come to believe that no force could withstand the German army. The tactic of lightning war, or blitzkrieg, had given him the confidence that he could defeat any enemy in a short period of time. But the Soviet Union, with its vast expanse, immense resources, and millions-strong population, was a different kind of enemy, one that Hitler gravely underestimated. Hitler was not only seeking the military defeat of the Soviet Union, but also pursued deep ideological goals. He viewed the Soviet Union as living space, or Lebensraum, a territory that had to be seized for the expansion of the German nation. Moreover, his deep hatred of communism and his desire to destroy it turned this invasion into an ideological war. In his mind, this war was not merely a military conflict, but a historical mission to reshape the destiny of the world. In the first weeks, it seemed that Hitler was right. The German army advanced with astonishing speed. Cities fell one after another. Millions of Soviet soldiers were captured, and Soviet defensive lines collapsed. The world watched this advance in astonishment. Even many military analysts believed that the Soviet Union would fall within a few months. But within these successes, the seeds of failure had been sown from the very beginning. One of Hitler's greatest mistakes was underestimating the enemy. He believed that the Soviet Union was a paper giant that would collapse with a single blow. But what he failed to consider was the Soviet Union's strategic depth, its ability to mobilize resources, and the spirit of popular resistance. Unlike France, the Soviet Union had not prepared for weeks, but for years to resist an invasion, even if it meant retreating deep into its own territory. As German forces advanced, their supply lines became dangerously overstretched. Thousands of kilometers of distance, poor roads, and shortages of fuel and equipment gradually slowed the German war machine. Meanwhile, the Soviet army, through calculated retreats, bought time and rebuilt its forces. Factories were relocated eastward, and weapons production continued. This became a war of attrition, a kind of war for which Germany had never been prepared. But perhaps Germany's greatest enemy was not the Soviet army, but nature itself. The harsh Russian winter, with its deadly temperatures and unbearable conditions, caught German forces off guard. They had prepared for a short war, not for a prolonged battle in lethal cold. Equipment froze, fuel ran low, and soldiers died one after another from cold and hunger. At the same time, Soviet forces, accustomed to such conditions, began their counteroffensives. The Battle of Moscow was a turning point. The German army advanced to the gates of the Soviet capital, but failed to capture it. This was Hitler's first major defeat, a defeat that showed his war machine was not invincible. After that, the war entered a phase that Germany could no longer control. The Battle of Stalingrad, which came later, delivered the final blow to Hitler's dreams. But beyond the military details, Barbarossa carries a great historical lesson, a lesson that has been repeated many times in history, yet often overlooked. Arrogance, even for the most powerful, can be fatal. At the height of his power, instead of consolidating his position, Hitler chose to attack the greatest possible enemy. He ignored the warnings of his generals, underestimated geographical and economic realities, and overestimated his own capabilities. This combination of arrogance and overreach led him toward a decision that ultimately destroyed not only his army, but the entire Nazi regime. History is full of such examples: empires that collapsed at the height of their power, leaders who made fatal decisions due to overconfidence, and civilizations that perished by ignoring their own limitations. But what makes Barbarossa unique is its vast scale and its global impact. Had Hitler not attacked the Soviet Union, World War II might have taken a different course. Germany might have been able to consolidate its power. Europe might have remained under Nazi control for a longer time. But these what-ifs only demonstrate how a single decision can change the fate of millions. From an analytical perspective, Barbarossa is a classic example of strategic failure. Despite its initial successes, the operation failed due to the mismatch between political capabilities and military capability. Hitler had overly ambitious goals, but lacked the resources and planning necessary to achieve them. This imbalance ultimately led to the collapse of the entire strategy. The operation also shows how ideology can distort rational decision-making. Instead of conducting a realistic assessment of conditions, Hitler made decisions influenced by his ideological beliefs. He belittled the enemy, ignored its capabilities, and entered a war he could not win based on false assumptions. Perhaps the most important lesson of this story, however, is for the modern world. In a world where major powers continue to compete, and where political and military decisions can have far-reaching consequences, the lesson of Barbarossa is more relevant than ever. Power, if not accompanied by humility and rationality, can lead to destruction. Leaders, organizations, and even individuals, if trapped in arrogance and overconfidence, may make decisions that seem successful in the short term, but prove disastrous in the long run. Barbarossa reminds us that no power is absolute, no victory is guaranteed, and no enemy should ever be underestimated. It is a warning from the depths of history to all who believe themselves invincible. In the end, when we look at this event, we cannot help but ask, if Hitler had been a little more cautious, if he had listened to warnings, if he had set aside his arrogance, would history have been different? The answer to this question will never be fully known. But what is clear is that arrogance and overreach can bring even the most powerful to their knees. And perhaps this is the lesson we must remember above all, a lesson that applies not only on the battlefield, but also in our everyday lives. Sometimes, our greatest enemy is not outside us, but within us.